If you've applied for asylum in the United States and you're waiting to have your asylum interview or your court hearing, then you need to see this video because I'm going to share with you 8 questions that I guarantee you're going to be asked as part of your asylum case. I'm a former government asylum officer, and I did thousands of immigration interviews in my 11 years working for the government's 2 main agencies for asylum and refugee matters. And I want to share with you today a few of the questions that you can expect in your case so that you can be prepared to answer them in a thoughtful and clear way, so the asylum officer or immigration judge understands exactly how you meet all of the requirements for asylum. I'm Brian Manning, and I used to be an asylum officer with the government, but now, as an asylum lawyer, I help immigrants all over the country to secure their future in America through asylum. And let me know in the comments if you've got an asylum case pending or you're considering applying. And I'd especially like to hear from you if you've been waiting for an asylum interview for multiple years. Okay, let's get started. Here are 8 questions that you'll definitely be asked in your US asylum case. Number 1, why did you leave your country? This usually gets asked near the beginning of the substantive part of the asylum interview, after you've taken care of the administrative tasks, including the review of your asylum application. And with this question, the officer is basically asking you to summarize your case in a sentence or 2. It may be phrased alternatively as something like, why did you decide to apply for asylum? Or why are you seeking asylum in the United States? So whatever the exact phrasing, the point is the same. The officer wants to know what your case is about in a nutshell. Now, I recommend thinking hard about your case and coming up with 1 or 2 sentences that you can use to answer this question, in which you're giving the officer a snapshot, or a preview, if you will, of what your case is all about. So, for example, it could sound something like this. I fled my country because I feared for my life after being physically attacked 3 times and threatened with death many times by my country's intelligence service because I was actively involved in opposition political activities, including by organizing protests against the government. Now, do you see what I did there? I addressed a few key things. I mentioned past harm and threats. I indicated who it was that did those things and who it is that I fear, and I indicated the reason that I've been targeted. And these are key aspects of an asylum claim. This kind of summary gives the officer an idea of what your case is all about. Okay, next up, number 2. Have you ever been physically harmed in your country? The officer is assessing whether you've suffered harm in your country in the past that is sufficiently severe to rise to the level of persecution. Now, persecution basically means grave harm, and they need to know whether what you've endured is bad enough to meet this threshold, as this is an important part of the asylum eligibility analysis. So you've got to be ready to talk in detail about all instances of physical harm that you've faced, and you need to know dates, or at least the month and year if you can't remember the exact date, of all such incidents. And as painful as it may be to think about, you do need to be prepared to recount exactly what happened in as much detail as you possibly can. You'll also need to discuss any injuries that you suffered as a result of any attacks and to describe what medical treatment you sought for them, if any. Okay, next up, number 3 on our list of 8 questions I guarantee that you'll be asked in your asylum case. Have you ever been threatened in your country? You see, threats are relevant because they can show that someone wants to target you for harm in the future. And this is crucial because outside of a couple fairly rare circumstances, you do need to show that you're at real risk of being severely harmed in the future. You've got to convince the asylum officer that someone would want to hurt you if you returned to your country. And threats that people have made can show this intent to persecute you in the future. As with incidents of past physical harm, well, you need to be able to talk about any threats in detail. So do take time to think about this. You may want to write out details about all past incidents of harm and threats so that you can study it, because it can be hard to recall details about traumatic events in the stressful environment of an asylum interview. Okay, we're on number 4. What did they say to you? The asylum officer wants to know what the persecutor said at the time of any incidents of harm and as part of any threats, because this can help the officer understand the motive for targeting you. You see, it's not enough just to show that you've been harmed and are at risk of being harmed in the future. Rather, you've also got to convince the officer that the reason you're being persecuted is that you possess one of the 5 protected characteristics under US asylum law. Those are your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or something called membership in a particular social group. And you've got to show that one of those things is, at least in a substantial part, motivating the persecution. And the words that the persecutors use may help us understand their motives. So you'll get this question over and over again. What did they say? Did they say anything else? What else did they say? Did they mention anything else? By the way, if you want to maximize your chances for asylum success, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss the insights that I share on this channel. Okay, we're ready for number 5. Did you report it to the authorities? If the persecutors are not direct employees of the government, then the asylum officer will want to know whether you sought help from the authorities, like the police or perhaps the prosecution service. Now, this is because where the persecutors are so-called private actors, meaning that they're not from the government, well, you've got to show that the authorities are unable or unwilling to help you. So be ready to discuss any attempts to get help. If you didn't go to the authorities, then be ready to explain why. Okay, number 6. How has what you've been through affected your life? Now, remember how we talked earlier about the word persecution? And I said that one of the things that the officer is assessing is whether the past harm that you've endured is sufficiently severe to rise to the level of persecution. Well, enduring emotional or psychological harm is relevant to that persecution analysis. Now, if you continued to suffer emotionally from things that you've been through in your country, well, this can help show that the past harm was bad enough to be considered persecution. So if you've suffered depression or maybe have nightmares or feel fearful, or if you've ever seen a mental health professional for help in dealing with what you've endured, then you should be ready to talk about this at your asylum interview. Okay, we're on number 7. Could you be safe if you relocated to a different place within your country? Now, this is important because you won't win asylum if you could just go to a different place in your home country, like a different city or state or region, and be safe. So do spend time thinking about this and be ready to explain why it is that you could not be safe, or why internally relocating would be especially difficult for you or your family. And finally, number 8. Is there anything else that you want me to know? You see, for most of the asylum interview, you're going to be cut off frequently, and the officer is going to dictate where things go. You don't just get to say whatever you want. They ask you questions and you answer them. But at the end of the interview, they do have to give you a chance to talk about anything that you think is important, but which you have not yet had the chance to tell the officer about. So, if there is something that you think is important to your claim, but which has not yet been addressed, then this is your chance to bring it up. But note that it is totally fine to say, no, I think we've covered it all, if you really do think that all the important stuff has been discussed. If you're ready to take the next step and get help with your asylum case, then call my office today. That number is 713-909-0401. And remember, we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you live. Call us now to schedule an asylum strategy session so that we can help you secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's an honor to support you in your asylum journey.